started. Like I said, we have 3 tactics today, and we barely made it through last week when we had 3 tactics. So let's jump right into it. My name is Sam. I'm a group coach with Ops Boss Coaching, if this is your first time here. And we welcome you in, and thank you so much for joining us. I'll give a little summary of what we've gone over so far, just to let you know what we've covered if you're just now coming on. So far we've talked about getting our mindset ready for the shift, expense management, leverage, lead gen, lead conversion, and marketing. So now we're diving into how to set up sellers and buyers for success. And the same as last week, with the more agent heavy topics, I'm looking at it and I want you all to look at it from an ops perspective. So even though these are heavy agent topics, how can we support them as operations people so that they can succeed? So tactic 7, I'll give a little summary, and then I would love to hear what you got out of the chapters first before I kind of dive in and give you my 2 cents. Tactic 7 was seller pricing strategies. So sellers who are slow to recognize the shift will quickly become overpriced and consequently be overlooked. The shift is exposing and magnifying the real estate price conflict between the asking price the seller wants versus the price the buyer is willing to pay. We need to use pricing to empower sellers as much as possible, and the greatest risk is in overpricing. So what we have been seeing, and what I noticed, how I noticed the shift was coming was houses were sitting on the market, or we had to do a price drop, or sellers were really confused why their houses were not selling within a matter of hours. And that got me thinking, what is going on? Because this is unusual. And still to this day, so we've been in a shift for, I would say, at least 2 months now. Sellers are still confused as to why it's taking so long for their house to sell, which tells me, okay, are we not educating our sellers enough at the appointment? Are we not setting those expectations? A little quote I like that bounced off of this is, in a buyer's market, sellers are often going through the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, then acceptance. Our job is to counsel them through it. So what stood out to you in this tactic? Kelly?
I mean, for me, I love all the thinking about it from an operations perspective and how we can help support our agents. There are so many graphs and charts in here that we can add into our listing presentations to help our agents and prompt them to have those conversations about pricing strategies in a shifting market with their sellers when they're meeting. So I just love all the graphs, and we work most of those into our listing presentation.
Yeah, I want to bounce off that because I did write down some of the figures that I saw that would be amazing in a listing presentation. The graphs on page 146, so figure 33 and 34, those could definitely go in there. What else did I see? The 7 maxims for pricing in a shifting market on page 156. We can definitely add those. I think overloading our listing presentations with as much information and data from the past that we could give clients with how these look, and how they will move forward. Because remember, real estate is super cyclical and we need to educate our clients on that. I think any data that we can give in our listing presentations would be super, super helpful.
And piggybacking on that, on page 156, where the 7 maxims for pricing in a shifted market, number 4 is super important for us as operations people as well. Keep your presentation as current as possible. Let your ongoing research do the talking. So just because you update your listing presentation this week, in 30 days, it may need to be updated again. Stay on top of the market, be the expert in your local market, and make sure that you're updating that and helping your agents update that presentation.
What I'm wondering is, how often should we be updating our listing presentations? Like, how quickly is the market changing from week to week?
The way we did our listing presentation was we had most of it, 95% of it was the same all the time, like marketing, unless you're changing your marketing, but most of it about the team. We had objections in there. And then we had one section that was the most important section, which was national market, regional market, your market. National market and regional market, you could update maybe once a week, once a month, something like that. Your market, we updated for every listing presentation. And it was just a one-page thing, but it had specific statistics, days on market, list price to sell price, you know, average median sale price, average days on market, whatever. So you didn't have to update the whole thing, but that section was updated frequently.
I know a common question in our group coaching calls is where people find that data. Can anyone enlighten us on where the national level data, the regional data, and your market data can be found?
So if you're with KW, you can find it usually in KW and Gary's economic presentation. It's a little bit old probably at this point because it's from February, but he'll be doing it again in August. You can get it from NAR sometimes. Your local MLS usually puts out regional statistics. So you can use, like our region is DC, Maryland, Virginia. And then your market is literally just running the comps in your listings competition. It might be a subdivision, a zip code, a school district. It just depends.
Also,
Right,
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kelly.
I was going to say also, if you're with KW, I think that KW's statistical person does something live on KW Connect every Friday about what they're seeing in the market. So that's also a really great resource to log on and watch that. Jim Talbot, I think is his name. So he does an update, I think weekly on KW Connect.
Yeah, and as ops people, we should be watching those sorts of things and then educating our clients on, or our agents on it, because sometimes not only do we need to be informed on what's going on in the market because we'll be working with those buyers and sellers potentially, we need to update our agents on it as well, because sometimes they don't have time to watch those things. So can we watch those things for them and then give them the Cliff Notes version? We do that pretty often. And then you can also announce those things in your team meetings. We do in our team meeting, we do a little blurb on what's going on in the market at different levels so that we make sure our agents are in the know.
Sam, can I add to that?
Yeah.
It's Hannah. So we do the same thing. We actually do like a Facebook Live of our monthly market updates. And I encourage my agents, I know they should like know the stats anyways, but there's one agent on our team that's very analytical that does it. And so we want the agents to watch it too. And one of the things that we just had, so we went from 0.7 months of inventory. It's been that way for like 9 months to 2 or 3 months of inventory, like boom. And so I thought, what an important fact for us to have, right, going into the listings and sharing that, because people in the market that are getting ready to list their house are not going to know it's shifted that quickly, but we have the data to show that to them so that we're backed when we're having those conversations.
Isn't that crazy how fast it changes like that?
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember we had, I think it was 2.5 weeks of inventory in the winter. And I'm like, what do we do with it? So it's just crazy how it's changing.
Sam, one of the other things that you can do on the operations side is flip back through chapter 7 and the other chapters as well. There's a lot of things in here where Gary writes about the seller will ask you this, and this is how you respond. So 2 things. One is there's great scripts in there and great like ways to word things like about, you know, you don't want to chase the market and things like that. So you can get scripts out of that. You can also pull those out and do a Q&A section in your pre-listing presentation and ask those questions like, you know, should I, you know, price ahead of the market or behind the market, whatever. You can pull the things out of there. But our goal was always to get to the listing presentation and they've already been exposed to all the potential issues and questions and have them answered so that we could talk about the important stuff and not this. Our job really has now moved from persuading to educating and helping people make good decisions.
Does anyone send their sellers homework before a listing presentation? I've heard this tactic recently. Very recently actually, and I thought it was so interesting because I think it's perfect in a time like this with the market shifting where we want to educate our sellers as much as possible. we want to give them that information before we even get to their house to look at it, in my opinion. I think that's super valuable. So what can your team put together? What can you put together as homework for your sellers that can inform them before the agent actually ever arrives to their house? And I think market information would be perfect. Not only would that be in your presentation, but like Christy said, if they're exposed to it beforehand, it's not as like shocking when you're talking about it in person.
We actually used to hand deliver a pre-done, it was in a leather portfolio, and we kept about 10 of them around. It depends on how much volume your team does. It wasn't meant for them to keep, but it had over 100 pages in it, and it covered everything that we would normally cover in a listing presentation, but the goal was that they looked at it ahead of time, and it had homework in it. It had, you know, here's the list of improvements that you've made, my favorite features, all the things. So if you arrive at the listing appointment and they've already filled that out, you know that they're committed. And if they haven't, then you know, you have a different conversation.
Right. Sarah, did you have something to say?
Yeah, just a follow-up question. And I don't want to go off on a tangent, but an issue I'm dealing with some of my agents is they're saying they're just going to take a walkthrough, that it's not an official listing presentation. So they're not going completely prepared. What are some tips for reinforcing the need for all of this information? Because I'm finding that our sellers are coming and, you know, the agents are saying, oh, it's just a quick walkthrough to give our opinion. And then all of a sudden, oh, well, now we're listing this house. I didn't realize it was going to be an impromptu listing appointment. And the sellers aren't really prepared. So how do you reinforce the need for that with your agents?
I'm wondering how they ended up at the house not knowing what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of absurd. So I should say our business is 95% sphere and referral. So lots of times these are personal relationships that they say, oh, you know, we're not thinking about selling. Would you just take a quick walk through the house and let me know what you think we should do to prepare? And then they actually kind of do a great job when they're there by converting that into a listing, but they're not coming from a place of education right away. It's just kind of like a little more.
Are those listings actually going active and selling, or are those listings getting signed and then they're not really that motivated and they sit on the market?
This is where we're finding the shift. This is where we're feeling it most right now. I was on the call yesterday, and it was like a major light bulb for me. Like, our sellers are antsy right now and upset, and it's because they weren't properly educated. They were, you know, we did not manage their expectations coming in because they don't have all the info because they weren't handled properly from the start.
Sarah, do you think it's reasonable to ask those agents to go back and do a proper listing appointment when it's time to list in order to educate, or will that seem?
No, I just think, yeah,
because we run into the same things. We do a lot of database, and I know like sometimes my husband will go out and he'll just like share some info and won't have the stats, but then he'll have to return with the data in order for them to like sign paperwork and set pricing strategy.
Yeah. So that's when they need, even if it's not right away, at least go back with it for the second time. Yeah. Because our listing team then theoretically goes out with them to sign listing paperwork and do that. So really that's just going to be the education opportunity.
I think what you might want to do is provide them a script. If that happens a lot, here's the script for when this happens. And the reality is the market is changing so quickly. It's awesome that they're signing the listing, but is it actually going to sell? So they need to plant the seed that, hey, I'm going to give you a price range of where the market is today. Before we go on the market, we're actually going to meet and go over the comps and figure out your strategy for pricing because the market's changing on a daily basis, something like that.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Looks like Kim in the chat said a pre-listing book and send them a pre-listing email prior to the appointment from operations. CC the agent and confirm the appointment time. Call it a listing appointment. Can you take it over in that way?
100% when I know about them in advance.
Yes. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to tactic 8 since we're already 15 minutes in. This was about seller staging strategies. The summary that I put together was very few people have the ability to visualize beyond what they see. Does the price match the condition? Staging is super important in a shift because stage homes on average sold in half the time that non-staged homes did. Sellers with staged homes ended up with 6.3% more than their asking price on average. Staging helps get sellers to sell their homes in the least amount of time for the most amount of money. And I really like the line that says, beauty's in the eye of the buyer, and it's time to start selling a lifestyle. I think we're going to see an uptick in staging. I have never once ordered staging for the team I'm on. And I've never once been in a market like this.
Wow.
Ellie, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, wow. I mean, on our team, staging was, that was part of our value proposition. We had a staging consult on every appointment. And it makes a world of difference. And even if it's not, vacant homes, exploring, what's the word I'm looking for? Virtual staging. There's great companies. Box Brownie is one for virtual staging, if that's allowed in your MLS. But trying to figure out how can we make the home look better in this market.
Right. And the house might be gorgeous. What we've been running into is the house is gorgeous, but it doesn't appeal to the buyers that are looking at it. And we need to be looking through a buyer's lens. I think that's really important, because you might think your house is nice and that it's awesome and it has all these updates and this great color scheme, but is it appealing to the majority of the buyers out there? I love the story on page 160 where the agent shows examples of the stage versus unstaged home and asks which home will catch the buyer's attention. We can totally add these examples to our listing presentations for our agents. Some people don't want to stage their homes. They think it's too much work. They think, oh, it'll sell anyway. But when you show them the data, when you show them, look at this picture of this stage bedroom and look at this picture of the before, which house would you want? I think that's super powerful to show them examples.
And also, I was going to say, if you are doing staging, if you don't have those examples and you start doing them, make sure that you're getting those before and after photos to make sure that you can include and market those in your listing presentation. This is an example of one that we did.
Yeah. I like the line that says the internet is replacing the first showing. So staging is so important to have done before you list. And then the people look at it on the internet first. Like when I was looking for houses, if I wasn't sold on the pictures, I would never go see that house, because very rarely is it better in person than what you see in the pictures. So I think we need to put a lot more time into staging and photos even. How can we support our agents when it comes to staging? Or what are you guys doing now for supporting your agents when it comes to staging?
Going back to the listing presentation again, having those statistics, making sure we know what those selling statistics are, putting those in the pre-listing presentation, making sure our agents are talking about it.
I agree. Having a stager for your team, even, knowing someone that will do the staging. I think that's step number one. And if you can't go the staging route, then having a list of vendors that you can give to your clients that can help them do home improvements and staging on their own.
We also if you're not doing staging, whether or not you're doing staging, we also had a preparing for photography checklist that, had 20 points on it that we sent out, a week prior to photos, just to help the photos look better, right? Make sure that the toilet seats are closed, the fans are off, basic items like that.
That checklist also provide it to all the photographers you use. Make sure that you're using your photographers as if they're part of your team, even when they're not your team, because they can help coach the people on how to get the best pictures too.
I know our checklist that we have, we just ripped it off of our photographer, the one they send out. It was so good. I'm like, I love this so much. So we just added it in our prep your home for photos email that goes out to the seller. I really liked on page 163, there is the buyer experience determined staging priorities. There's the figure which tells you like kind of what should be staged first based on what buyers are looking for. And I will agree that curb appeal is definitely at the top. It's the first picture of the house you see. So buyers are not wasting any time. They're very picky, and curb appeal comes first. Then of course the entryway kitchen, master bedroom, bath, living areas, outdoor bedrooms, and then backyard. I think that's a great figure, and that's also something that you can put in your listing presentation when you're talking about your staging piece.
Something I was going to mention, I know that we're talking from the ops perspective, but if your agents are not already doing this, walking your sellers through the house in this format and saying, hey, think about yourself as a buyer that's walking through this home for the very first time and what that experience looks like. And it's exactly as this flow chart is here. Doing that and then doing a follow-up with them over FaceTime the day before photos to see what they've done to prepare and improve that flow and that experience is something that's worked really well for me before.
That's what I was thinking about too earlier, is how do we make sure our sellers are doing this? You know, like we leave them with all of these tactics and tools and tell them what to do, but how do we make sure they're doing it? That's just something that popped in my mind. Maybe that's something I need to build into our coming soon brevity plan on our team, to make sure to see if the sellers need anything, if they need any assistance, to see how it's going, check-ins and things like that. I know the agents check in, but it's always good to have the operations covering you as well. Did anything else stand out to you guys in this tactic? Looks like we have 9 minutes left and 1 tactic left. Nothing? All right, moving on. We're on to buyers, which I am passionate about. I'm on the buy side. I love them so much. Happy to see them shifting in the market where they can actually buy houses now. So tactic 9, overcoming buyer reluctance. Summary. In a shift, buyers can easily lose sight of the primary reasons driving their home purchase. The buyer thinks they have all the time in the world to buy, and the buyers want a deal. So it starts with a quote that I thought was the perfect opener. If someone is going down the wrong road, he doesn't need motivation to speed him up. He needs education to turn him around. Then I go, so 170, page 171, that talks about having a best buy list. And I really liked this from an operations point of view, because operations can help the agents do this. So the best buy list is where the team is finding the best deals in town, because everyone wants a deal, sharing them with each other, and then the agents can share those with their buyers. And it says, get while the getting's good. Really liked that. Oh, then page 188. There's a lot of good figures in these chapters. I liked all the figures. The 4 strategies to overcome buyer reluctance. That's something I know we talked before about scripting. That could easily tie into your scripting. And then, of course, on page 189, where it talks, figure 47, where it talks about the scenarios, that could go in your buyer presentation. So now we've kind of switched from listing presentations over to the buy side in our buyer presentations. In the shift, we also need to work on the buyer presentation part and kind of show them like why buying now works out for you better than riding out the market and waiting for it to become different, or waiting for it to balance out, or, you know, all the reasons that they come up with. So what are some new additions that we can make to our buyer presentations to support our buyers and our buyer agents?
I think too, on page 182, Sam, something else that you could add, in the middle, it says, in your newsletter, on your website or blog or buyer presentation, insert my words, marketing pieces, advertising, continuously communicate local market statistics, financial information, and economic facts. Give a historical perspective as well as a current one. Offset a national perspective with the local one, kind of like what Christy was saying. So the same thing that we're doing for our sellers, we're doing for our buyers, and making sure we're staying on top of what's happening locally and updating that, you know, on an appointment by appointment basis in our buyer presentations.
Right. Is there any other data we should be adding into a buyer presentation? I feel like we focused a lot on the listing presentation and new data that we can add into there. Is there any new data outside of market reports that any of you would suggest putting into your buyer presentations moving forward?
I don't know if this goes under data. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry. We've had a lot of success with like purchase power illustrations, changes in market changes in interest rate and what that gets you. And then also buying down instead of, now that you're not overpaying for a home, you might still have access to that cash. What happens if you buy down a point, and how does that change your purchase power?
Christy, were you going to add something?
I was just going to add one more thing. It's not data, but something that was helpful for us to add in our buyer consultation was, I think we had, I don't remember the list. It was like 125 things that can go wrong with your transaction. And it was a reminder, and we had it both in listing and buyer presentation. It was a reminder of how important it is to actually work with a realtor. And it was an expectation. We had a what's next. Here's what the first part of the process is. These things are going to happen. Here's the second part. The appraisal could come in low. You may have a lot of repair items. It's setting the stage that bumps in the road are normal. And we are with you as experts to help you over those bumps so that when the bumps come, you don't freak out. One of the things you see in Shift is fallout rates of contracts are going to increase.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I forget what page it was on, one of the pages said something about, I can't find it, about continuing to communicate even after they go under contract all the way up until when they move in. You can't just put them under contract and then see them at the settlement table. It's got to be continuous communication. And I think about it like when I'm flying across the country, when the pilot comes on and he's like, okay, put your seatbelts on. We're going to have about 15 minutes of turbulence and then, everything's going to be fine. It's way better if I know it's coming than, oh my God, all of a sudden
Yes.
it drops 10 feet and I'm like, oh my God, we're going to die, right? So setting those expectations in the consultation up front and as part of your process.
And I think that's where the operations can step in, especially your transaction coordinators. How often, how are they educating your clients throughout the process of what's happening now? What can you expect next? These are the possibilities. How can we build that into our system to make sure that the operations is educating along the way? Oh, looks like someone found that for you. On page 177, to get willing buyers to the closing table and into their new home, you will have to check in regularly with them until they move in. And we put a lot of emphasis on our relationship doesn't stop at the closing table. Of course, we educate them all the way throughout, but we stay in contact even afterwards. I think that's important too. So then they can get market updates afterwards. Okay, did anything else stand out to you in this chapter or in this tactic? Looks like we have 2 minutes left.
One of the other things that we did back in the day was we changed our buyer and seller information forms. So we had people fill out a form when they listed their house and when they were coming in for buyer consult. And we asked a couple questions on there that would bring their motivation out. We asked why they're buying or why they're selling, and what date do you need to be in your new home by, or what's the absolute lowest price you need to get. You can ask questions like that, and sometimes they'll be like, well, I don't really want to give you that number, or I'm not really sure. That's going to give you a sign as to their motivation. Motivation during shift is everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that we're not working with people who really aren't motivated. So if you can figure out some sort of question to integrate either into your buyer listing consultation or on your forms, we liked doing it on the form because then we would kind of know ahead of time. You could just look right at that before you start your listing presentation and know their motivation.
Mm-hmm. Gene Rivers, when he came to visit us a few months back, he gave us his buyer and seller wants and needs analysis. Maybe that's something we could add to our resource center. Because that's really interesting. It's really interesting what you find out when you ask the buyer or the seller, what are their wants and what are their needs? And I think that's really important because all that ties into motivation.
Yeah, we did 3 levels of that. We had them fill out the form before the buyer consultation. That was part of our pre-buyer package.
Mm-hmm.
What are your non-negotiables? What do you want, or what do you need, and what do you want?
Mm-hmm. We actually have our ISAs dive into that when they're setting the appointments. I don't know if everyone has ISAs, has the luxury of that, but our ISAs dig for motivation before the agent even calls them pre-appointment. So that's awesome. All right, we are at 12:30. Christy or Brooke, do you have any announcements you would like to add? Not today.
We'll be, I don't know, Brooke, thanks for putting that in there. Brooke put in the information about group coaching in case you guys haven't, I forget who's been on the other calls, but Sam, Kelly, and Elizabeth and Kim are all group coaches. Did I miss anybody on here? So if you guys are interested in group coaching, the link is in there. We're also going to be having a shift class, a brand new class coming out October 5th with the most amazing Stephanie Brackett. So if you're interested in that, Brooke, I don't know if you already dropped that in there. There's a wait list to be notified when we release tickets for that. And I think that's good. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks, right?
Yep, 2 weeks. Thanks everyone for
Thanks,
coming.
guys.
We'll see you soon.